Think about the last time a really massive, just unavoidable roadblock dropped right in your path. Like maybe it was a sudden layoff or, an unexpected, really devastating medical diagnosis.
Right, or even just a catastrophic failure on a project you spent 6 months building.
Exactly. What was your immediate instinctual reaction? If you are like most people, it was this sudden rushing wave of biological panic. Your heart rate spiked, your stomach dropped, and, well, a white hot anger or absolute helplessness just took over.
Yeah, that initial hit is always so
It
intense,
really is. And what happens next? We almost always look around for a target. We point fingers, right? We blame the economy, bad luck, or just an unfair universe.
which is such a common response.
It is. But what if that exact feeling of prolonged paralysis is completely optional?
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are officially on episode 2 in our series exploring the ideas within the book, The Obstacle is the Way. And our mission today starts with a rather uncomfortable reality.
Oh, definitely. Nobody ever actually taught us how to process failure. If our initial reaction is to blame external forces, we are effectively surrendering our power to them. So regaining that power requires us to manipulate a single internal lever.
Well, I mean, it is a completely universal biological reflex to feel that initial wave of panic.
I know.
And it is completely valid,
Yeah.
When a threat appears, the amygdala, that's the ancient reptilian part of your brain, it basically hijacks your nervous system.
Right.
It floods you with adrenaline and demands that you either fight, flee, or freeze.
Oh.
The problem isn't that we have this reaction. The problem is that we have been conditioned to believe that this initial panicked reaction represents the objective truth of the situation.
Ah.
Assume that because the situation feels disastrous in our bodies, it must inherently be a disaster. But if we want to stop being paralyzed by these unique challenges, we have to recognize a fundamental dichotomy.
Which is?
The obstacle itself is external, but our desperation, our anger, and our feeling of being stuck are entirely self-inflicted. They're generated by our perception.
I want to spend some time on that word because perception is the transformative concept here. It's easy to think of perception just as the act of seeing what is in front of you.
Yeah, exactly.
But in this context, perception is not just seeing, it is the act of deciding what those events actually mean. To visualize this, think of it like the autofocus on a camera.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Imagine you are standing directly in front of a chain link fence and you're trying to look at this massive, beautiful mountain in the distance. But when panic sets in, your brain's autofocus forcefully locks onto the metal wire right in front of your eyeball.
Wow, yeah, that's all you can see.
Exactly. The wire is literally all you can see. It is overwhelming, and it blurs out the entire world. Reframing your perception isn't about pretending the fence isn't there. It is about manually twisting the lens, forcing your focus past the wire, and letting the fence blur out so you can finally see the mountain.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize it. The wire, in your analogy, represents our prejudices, our expectations, and, our immediate fears. When we are highly emotional or short-sighted, we let the camera focus entirely on the threat. We actively add to our own troubles by making the obstacle look monolithic. We lose the mountain.
We really do.
What you just described, manually twisting the lens, is cognitive reframing. It is a deliberate, mechanical discipline of filtering out the noise. If you can force your brain to look past the immediate emotional spike, what remains is the simple, straightforward truth.
Which changes everything.
It does. You begin to see events in a vacuum. And in a vacuum, events are neutral. They're neither inherently good nor inherently bad. They just are.
Events just are. That challenges a major assumption I think a lot of us hold. We naturally label things as tragedies or blessings the very second they happen.
Absolutely.
But I know a lot of people listening are probably thinking, well, sure, maintaining neutral focus sounds great in a sterile laboratory, but what about in the chaos of the real world when your livelihood is actually on the line? How do you manually twist that lens when the building is metaphorically burning down?
That is exactly where the concept gets tested. To see how it works in reality, look at John D. Rockefeller. He possessed an incredibly rare quality known as sang-froid, which essentially translates to an unflappable coolness under extreme pressure.
Sang-froid. I love that term.
It's a great word. Consider the panic of 1857. It was a massive financial crisis. The markets were in absolute chaos, banks were running dry, businesses were collapsing overnight, and grown men were losing their minds, completely yielding to that amygdala hijack we talked about earlier.
Just total panic.
Exactly. But Rockefeller, who was just a young businessman in Cleveland at the time, did not panic. He exhibited this intense self-discipline where the greater the chaos became around him, the calmer and more observant he became.
And he didn't just hide out and wait for it to pass either. He actively walked into the chaos, refused to take the emotional bait, and watched what everyone else was doing. He looked at the panic like a forensic scientist. He watched men make terrible reactive decisions driven by greed and fear, and he learned secondhand from their mistakes. He basically used their panic as his own personal tuition.
Precisely. His careful, objective perception became an absolute superpower. He had the strength to resist the temptation to panic, and equally important, the temptation to get overly greedy when things were covered.
Right, because he kept that neutral focus.
Because he wasn't focused on the chain-link fence of the immediate crash, he could perceive things that others saw as purely apocalyptic as something to approach rationally. He looked at the wreckage and saw a system, a set of rules, and a pure opportunity. He simply could not be rattled because he refused to let external events dictate his internal weather.
This brings up an incredibly important distinction. My immediate assumption, and probably the assumption of anyone reading about a titan like Rockefeller, is that he was just a genetic anomaly.
Right, that he was just born that way.
Exactly. You assume a guy like that was just born with ice water in his veins and a missing panic button in his brain. But the reality is that this unflappability, this sang-froid, is entirely a learned behavior. It is a practiced discipline.
Yes, it is.
It is not an innate trait you either have or you don't. That completely shifts the framework. Because if viewing a negative situation rationally is a learned skill, it means anyone listening right now can cultivate it. But how do we bridge that gap? How do we go from recognizing the theory to actually executing it in our daily lives?
Well, it requires a specific, actionable framework. Overcoming obstacles isn't just a vague philosophy. It is an operational system that breaks down into three critical pillars: perception, action, and will.
Perception, action, and will.
Yes. Perception is exactly what we've been discussing, the discipline of how we view the problem and managing our internal lens. But perception alone isn't enough. It must be followed by action, which is the directed energy and creativity we use to actively break the problem apart and turn it into leverage.
And the third pillar?
And finally, will. Will is the cultivation of an enduring inner strength that allows us to handle the inevitable defeats, the unfairness, and the long-term fatigue along the way.
I want to ground this in reality for a second, because the theory is pristine, but the application is messy. I want to push back a little on the idea of just choosing not to panic.
Okay, let's hear it.
Let's talk about the heat of a real crisis. Say you do get that devastating phone call. You are facing bankruptcy or a severe health crisis. In that exact fraction of a second, the feelings of despair and absolute powerlessness feel completely involuntary. Your body reacts before your conscious mind even boots up.
That's very true.
So how difficult is it to actually execute this discipline when your entire nervous system is screaming that the sky is falling?
It is. Well, it is monumentally difficult. And we need to be very clear here. Disciplined perception is not toxic positivity. It is not standing in the middle of a fire and pretending you aren't getting burned.
Right.
The Stoic approach acknowledges the biology of fear. When that phone call comes, your heart will race. You will feel that sinking sensation. That initial primal reaction is involuntary. But the core lesson here is about the second thought.
The second thought.
Yes. The microhabit you must develop is creating a psychological distance, a pause between the stimulus and your response. You feel the panic, you acknowledge it, and then you firmly tell yourself, nothing external is actually making me feel despair.
Wow.
The situation is just a situation. The despair is a function of how I'm choosing to frame it. The initial shock is unavoidable, but remaining in a state of desperation is a choice.
A choice.
We have to really slow down here and emphasize that. We choose to give in to that ongoing narrative of powerlessness.
Yeah.
And because it is a choice, we can choose to stop.
That is the microhabit right there. Finding the pause. When the wall hits you, the immediate action isn't to fix the whole problem, it is to secure that pause.
Exactly.
You take a breath. You actively separate the objective facts of the situation from your emotional reaction to it. You look at the facts and say, okay, this happened. Now what is in my control?
That is the pivotal question.
You ignore the people around you who are losing their minds. You bring your focus entirely to the present moment, and you zero in only on your next immediate move.
Exactly. And once you secure that perception, you move to the second pillar action. Because once you strip away the fear, you're left with raw material.
Moving from that individual microhabit to the broader implications, there is this standout line from the text that I think really anchors this entire message. It's from Andy Grove, the legendary former CEO of Intel.
Oh, I love this quote.
It's so good. With real dynamic energy, he famously noted that bad companies are destroyed by crisis. Good companies survive them. Great companies are improved by them.
That is such a powerful way to frame it.
Right. Great companies are improved by them. If we lift that corporate wisdom and apply it directly to your personal life, the implications are staggering. The ultimate goal of this entire philosophy isn't just to put your head down and survive an obstacle.
Surviving is just what a good company does.
Exactly. The goal is to be great. The goal is to actively steal good fortune from misfortune. The obstacle in the path literally becomes the path. Within every single roadblock, there is a hidden mechanism to improve your condition. When we meet adversity with disciplined action, we don't just endure it, we consume it.
To see what stealing good fortune from misfortune actually looks like in practice, we have to look at how historical figures deployed action and will. Take Demosthenes, the great Athenian orator.
Okay.
When we hear his name today, we associate it with unparalleled rhetorical power. But Demosthenes was not born a great speaker. In fact, he was born frail, awkward, and with a debilitating speech impediment.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was severe. And to make matters worse, he was orphaned at a young age, and the guardians entrusted with his massive inheritance stole it all from him.
And in ancient Athens, if you wanted to get your money back, you couldn't just hire a lawyer. You had to physically stand up in the courts and argue your own case in front of a massive crowd. So here is a frail kid with a severe stutter facing an obstacle that requires the exact skill set he fundamentally lacks.
Exactly. The obstacle was tailor-made to exploit his greatest weakness. But Demosthenes didn't just accept his fate. He used action and will to turn his limitation into his greatest asset. He didn't just practice speaking, he designed a brutal training regimen.
What did he do?
He filled his mouth with pebbles and practiced enunciating through the pain. He ran up steep hills while reciting poetry to build his lung capacity. He stood on the shore and projected his voice over the roaring ocean waves so he could learn to overpower the noise of a rowdy Athenian jury.
That is incredible.
He literally used the resistance of the pebbles and the ocean to forge a legendary voice. He didn't just overcome his stutter, he became the greatest orator of his era because of his stutter. The obstacle wasn't in the way. The obstacle was the exact mechanism that created his greatness.
That is the perfect embodiment of the third pillar will. It is the endurance to keep putting pebbles in your mouth day after day. And we see this pattern repeated constantly across history. Look at Thomas Edison.
Oh, the lab fire.
Yes. When Edison was 67 years old, his massive laboratory complex in West Orange, New Jersey, caught fire. Decades of priceless research, prototypes, and chemical formulas went up in massive green and yellow flames. Fire engines couldn't stop it.
That sounds absolutely devastating.
It was. When Edison arrived on the scene and saw his entire life's work being reduced to ash, he didn't fall to his knees and weep. He didn't blame the universe. He famously turned to his son and said, "Go get your mother and all her friends. They will never see a fire like this again."
It is a stunning display of perception. He recognized immediately that he could not control the fire. The fire was an objective, neutral fact, but he could control his response.
Right.
He is reported to have said, "We've just got rid of a lot of rubbish." He didn't just survive the crisis, he used it to wipe the slate clean. Within weeks, the company was partially back in operation, and they went on to have one of their most profitable years ever.
We see this pattern repeated constantly. It wasn't just Demosthenes and Edison. The text talks about Abraham Lincoln navigating the absolute darkest periods of the Civil War with this enduring, compassionate will.
Yes, and people like Amelia Earhart or Steve Jobs, they didn't just survive their challenges.
Right. They were defined by their ability to transform negative situations into an education, a skill set, and ultimately a fortune. They all shared this unified approach. They understood that the outward appearance of an obstacle is almost always a deception. I think that is the perfect way to phrase it. A massive wall looks like a dead end. But that is only if you let your mental autofocus lock onto the brick surface. By learning to twist the lens, you stop seeing problems as dead ends. You realize that everything standing in your way is actually just raw material for your own improvement.
It really is.
Unhelpful perceptions will always try to invade your mind. They will try to scare you, cause despondence, and throw off your internal compass. But the discipline of creating that pause, of choosing your response, acts as an impenetrable shield. It allows you to maintain your composure.
And that composure is everything.
It is. Your composure determines whether you will be destroyed by the crisis, whether you will merely survive it, or whether you will be fundamentally improved by it.
As we bring these concepts together, I want to leave you with a compelling thought experiment to mull over in your own time. A practical way to apply the mechanics of perception, action, and will today.
I love thought experiments. What is it?
I want you to think about the absolute biggest, most frustrating, most sleep-depriving problem in your life right now. The exact issue you have been complaining about the most. Now, I want you to manually twist the lens.
Okay.
What would happen if you viewed that exact problem not as a roadblock unfairly dropped into your life, but as a mandatory, custom-built training simulator?
Oh, wow.
What if life specifically engineered that exact scenario to teach you the specific skill set, the exact patience, or the precise resilience that you are currently lacking? How would your daily approach change if you truly believed that the obstacle was the lesson?
A custom-built training simulator. That reframes the entire human experience. If it is a simulator, you don't get angry at the machine for throwing a challenge at you. You study the mechanics, you secure the pause, and you figure out the exact inputs required to beat it.
Exactly.
So, that is your mission. Look at your own life right now. Find your biggest obstacle today. Stop wishing it would magically disappear. Stop pointing fingers and blaming external forces for its existence. Embrace the reality of it.
Secure the distance.
Yes. Secure the psychological distance, strip away the fear, and look at the raw material underneath. Use your perception to see it clearly, your action to dismantle it, and your will to endure the process. Embrace that obstacle as your way forward.
Beautifully said.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. If you found value in this conversation, please like and subscribe to get notified about the next episode, where we will continue to break down these frameworks. Until then, keep your cool, twist the lens, and go turn your obstacle into your advantage.